Okay. Good morning. This is Thor, the Sketching Pirate, with lesson 3 on drawing as part of my little fun welcome to my little studio series. I'm testing a new software today, and I'll be expanding on it as the week goes. I'm actually having some more adjustments made to my system this week so that I can upload a lot more to a streaming source. And I'll be able to jump back and forth from drawing to talking to you face to face. But for right now, I'm introducing to you my glowing drawing pad. This is called a Cintiq. I'm going to show you in a moment. Right now we're looking at a mask of a Papua New Guinea piece that I will talk about in a minute, as far as how you draw something like that, or at least how you use it as an inspiration for a drawing. And we'll get into that. So if you have a sketch pad or a piece of paper, run and get it. I can't see your direct comments right now, so save your questions for the end and just hit them at me in the end. This software doesn't allow me to monitor Facebook, so I can't see what you're saying right now. But keep saying things. I'll see all the comments afterwards, and as well as make comments when you see this posted. So, okay, so let's begin here and kind of pick up a little bit where we left off. You're looking at my screen. This is one of many forms of drawing tools that I'll be using to do the demonstration. This is through the use of Photoshop and a drawing tablet called a Cintiq. It allows me to pretty much draw like I normally would. Once you get adjusted to it, it's not anything different than how I draw on a regular piece of paper. For me, that's the one great thing about computer stuff. You can use it as a crutch, or you can really use it as a great tool. And I've always done everything I can to use any digital or computer stuff to act like real paper or ink and things, and not use it to cheat. I use it simply as another way of being able to draw and yet be able to communicate with people. I do a lot of sketches and stuff with clients in other parts of the world, and I'll draw on the Cintiq and have it live and can talk about ideas and everything in the themed entertainment industry. Anyway, so let's begin. So back to contour line. I was trying to start to do this yesterday. Real quick, you can draw all kinds of shapes, and I encourage you to try this. Draw a bone shape. Draw something a little more simple, just something like that. And our idea. Remember, I told you a contour line and the idea that it's like wrapping tape around an object. Well, this is what helps you get 3D in that, as I called it, the glowing box of fog. Instead of thinking of a piece of paper as simply a flat surface that you're drawing on, start thinking of it as three-dimensional white fog if it's a white piece of paper that you're trying to create volume in. So now, this is the idea of how drawing through something. We'll start with the simpler one on the lower left. You want to try to figure out how to give this volume rather than just a weird shape. So you think again in terms of, if I were to wrap tape around here like this, and it were to go underneath, and I'm going to draw real lightly when it's on the other side, and then when I come up to the top that we see get heavier. Try this. Again, think of the top. You're wrapping tape around, and you can completely define what this shape is by how you create this top piece. For example, if I were to go like this and then go over, that's saying eventually that was a hard edge in the front. But since I really don't want this to be a hard edge in the front, I'm going to keep this as a soft, I was going to say a bar of soap, but this would be a pretty weird bar of soap. But draw through, think about it being tape going around here. And then let's put some tape on. Okay, this will get more into perspective, but if I was to try to figure out where the center of the top of this object is, some people would say, oh, okay, well, it's right in the middle between this line and this line. Well, it's not in the middle when you look at something on an angle or in perspective. What's going to happen is, the animators call it a center line. The center line is going to be a little bit further back, like this. This tape would wrap around and come around. You see how there's a little bit of a smaller space on this side than on that side. That will help establish a center line in perspective, and we'll get more into that, so don't worry. So here's this bone. All right, well, let's start here with this easy part. We'll wrap contour lines around it. And now it's going to kind of get a little bit trickier. I want this to have a little bit of a bend in the jog of that bone right there. In other words, it's not going to just go perfectly round. It's going to kind of dip down and then come back. And then it would swoop around here maybe, and you kind of go behind this form. Anyway, and then my center line again. We're going to come right around here. We're going to dip down and come up. Maybe we'll go like this. Wrap down around here. It would go on the bottom, something like this. So again, contour. Look how much dimension you get out of that. Even though we don't want to wrap tape, I won't go to the third one because I want to move on with this lesson. This is going to be a little bit longer lesson. It's going to have a lot of great information in it. So look at it again on Facebook and draw what I'm doing, and you're going to learn a lot. So now what we're going to talk about again is, so with contour, remember in the last lesson we also talked about, instead of using these lines, these tape lines on everything you draw, but do this exercise, this would be the way you study form in a sketch. It's not for something to show everybody. It's like, okay, what is this shape going to feel like? So if you're designing something like a sculpture or a tiki mug or a tiki to carve, this is a great exercise for you carvers out there, or anybody who works three-dimensionally, studying a form on paper by putting contour line around it. You'll start to be thinking in 3D right away. So next, let me talk about something real quick, how to apply this in a slightly different way. Remember, real quick, we talked about how the tree, remember our first lesson, we did the thing where we did those squiggly lines that came down, and we were able to show the squiggly way that you can go back in space or come forward in space with branches on a tree, depending on which way you go. Well, that is, again, a tool of knowledge that you use when you're looking at something out there that you're drawing from, or even trying to remember. Like, for example, let's say that we're trying to draw some of the trees that we see in nature. For example, but they don't have the lines, the tape lines running around it the way I showed you before. Let's take this type of tree, for example. Well, you see, most of the information of the contour lines are going up and down. They're going in a vertical way. But we can use this also as a tool without even getting into the light and dark side of a tree. If we just wanted to do a sketch to describe a tree like this, or a tree like this, where you see there's a lot of information going up and down, the way the bark is going, these vertical lines. So we look at that, and instead of getting overwhelmed by everything, we go, okay, a drawing is different than a photograph. A photograph tries to duplicate everything out there. As an artist, you can put in what you want or what you don't want, or make things up and change things. That's the beauty of being able to draw. You not only take in information from reality, but you are able to say something different about that information and reinvent a whole new world on your own, depending on what you want. So if we were to say that, for example, that we're going to draw a tree kind of like this. I'll do a real simple one. I'll do the first one I showed you, that sort of sequoia tree. Just the trunk. Let's just focus on that. If we were to actually do that, it would be, I'm going to show you, it would be something like this. You have the trunk of this tree, and let's draw the outer lines at first, because everyone knows how to do that. We've been doing that since we're kids. We always draw the outside lines of something, or try to. So let's say it was roughly something like that. Well, there's this little principle of drawing on a piece of paper. Even before you learn about how shadows and core shadows and everything work, which I'll get into in another lesson, how to make something go back and forward in space. Well, you'll find that if this were two lines, that we think of it, that you draw, the more that you take, and if you were to take a whole bunch of little dots, for example, a black line and then a whole bunch of little dots, and you were to do fewer dots as you got to the middle, and then you were to go and make more dots, and there's a term for this in art, it's called stippling, and many artists have used this to show how to define a dimension in a form, how to make something look like it goes back. There'll be a tendency for the darker and more solid areas that you fill in to go back in space, and the less dots, until you get to no dots towards the higher point of the form that is closest to you, it will tend to create this illusion of dimension. It's really kind of fun to do. If you're in traditional art school, nobody gets away without having some instructor that makes you do an entire drawing in stippling. Now, the other similar thing to this is cross-hatching. And even if you're not following the form, which really the best artists do, sorry, if you were to do something like this, and you were to crosshatch, getting fewer overlaps of the line as you get out to the form that comes forward. In other words, this area is where you want to say that we're coming forward towards us in the center. And this area we want to say is going back in space. The edge of the tree is turning, it's going back. So now, if we know that this, I think they call it chiaroscuro modeling. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I remember a teacher calling it that. Chiaroscuro means this kind of thing. Light tends to come forward, and dark gradations start to go back on a piece of paper or a painting. This is before they really understood, or sometimes they do it intentionally, but when artists were first discovering a lot of this stuff, they were noticing that this phenomenon would happen, this illusion. So if you use that information and you say, okay, well, everything I draw, I don't want to have to do cross-hatching or stippling, but I want to use the information out there, the texture of the tree, the bark, or something, to use this principle. Well, in the case of our tree that I showed you a minute ago, the sort of sequoia tree, it's lines going up and down. So, and it's these sort of shapes. If you look at the anatomy of the tree, they're kind of these individual shards of bark that are laid next to each other like this, if you look straight on. So you think to yourself, okay, as it turns around, as it comes forward, these are, if this is really the shape of one of these shards, as it goes back towards the edges, you'll notice they get skinnier and skinnier till you're looking just at the edge of the tree and you just see these real super skinny sort of shapes. So you think, okay, I'm going to use that to create contour and to turn the form of this tree. So, and then I'm going to make them even disappear. I'm going to edit out the information as it comes forward. So as an underdrawing, as we've learned about, you can, remember, go get a blue pencil or go get a red pencil from the art store. Prismacolor or Verithin make a great, Verithin, VERI-THIN, I think it is, make a great set of colored pencils. And use the blue or red as your underdrawing. So here with our red, I'm going to say that as we go towards the edge of the tree, these shapes are real skinny, almost line-like. And then as we get closer to the center of the tree, they're going to fatten up. They lock in like puzzle pieces, I'm noticing. And they really, and I'm exaggerating a little bit. The tree we looked at doesn't quite exactly do this. But again, this is the beauty of being able to draw something. You do what a photograph cannot do. You can make things happen. You can create forced realities that through observation you'll be able to use when you have nothing in front of you but your imagination. If you've done these things and learned from them by observation and these studies that you do, then later on you'll be able to make it up. You'll remember what you did in your brain, just like remembering a song when you listen to it a whole bunch of times. If you draw enough horses, you're going to be able to draw great horses out of your head. If you draw enough trees, you're going to be able to draw great trees out of your head and make them up. Make them anything you want. That's what's really amazing about drawing. Whether you're an artist that gets paid for it or not, drawing is almost like meditating. It is so rewarding for your brain because you're creating something. You're not just looking at something anymore. You're creating what you want. So notice, even before I show you what I'm about to show you, how taking this information of the shapes of the tree going back in space, and I'm again stylizing this greatly, not trying to make a realistic tree. I'm showing you the principle, and when you look at a real tree, you'll observe the exact shape and everything of these things and have a better idea of how to make it look believable. So now we use that same information, and that's my underdrawing. And because it's a Cintiq, I can fade that layer that I've just been working on a little bit. So I'm going to fade that back, just so you know it's still there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that information in my next drawing. This is when you'd pick up your regular pencil or your pen. And you'd say, okay, we know now from that stippling thing that on the side that if you draw stuff that it gets continually dark on the edges, it's going to go back in space. And if you draw stuff that lighter and more broad in the center, it's going to come forward on our piece of paper. So what am I doing? I'm looking and going, okay, I'm just going to use this information on the sides, and I'm going to say there's probably even another layer of these. You can barely see where it's just a sliver, like a line, as it goes to the edge. And then as you get forward on this, I'm going to get lighter with my line, or I'm just not going to draw the whole form at all. I'm just going to draw part of it. Because we want it to become, our line work and our information to become more dense the closer to the edge of our drawing that's supposed to be going back in space, that's supposed to be turning away from us. We want more information, darker forms, and instead of just stippling, instead of just cross-hatching, I'm actually using the pattern of what this tree is to do the same thing. Then we can go back and we can even put some line, bold line, a little bit darker, that again reinforces the shapes that I'm seeing and the silhouette of the side of that tree. So what we would do is we would do that on the other side as well. Now, to save time, here's where a mechanical drawing system works great, but if you don't feel like drawing the other side, although I hate this because you can see this in drawings that artists do, where you see all this stuff replicated because they were too lazy to draw it twice. It's not always laziness. Also, the great part about digital drawing is it saves time. So if I were doing this just to explain a concept, I would, let's see, watch this. So what I just did is copied and pasted the information, and I brought it to the other side. And see how really lousy that looks because it's too symmetrical. A tree is not symmetrical like that. But for the idea of the principle of what I'm saying, it explains it and saves me time drawing it for you. But oh, what's going on here? My layer is acting up. See, this is where the digital thing gets frustrating. I'm like, come on. Normally I would just pull out an eraser. I'm not able to do that here. Anyway, you can see how if you squint your eyes, the darker sides are going to end up going back in space. The more information is going to turn the form. And you can go back then and further reinforce that by little shapes inside. Squint your eyes. I used to have an instructor who would always say, squint down, you guys, squint down. You know, and everyone was squinting. He'd go, I know, don't worry. I mean, all you who are vain, I know it's probably going to add wrinkles to your sides of your eyes someday because you're squinting all the time. But as an artist, squint down, and that's going to help you in seeing what works. So again, I just replicate the other side. You never want to do this because, as you can see, these in nature you rarely see, even in things that are symmetrical, you rarely see forms that are exactly the same on a symmetrical living thing. But it defines the principle, what I'm trying to say. Okay, so real quick, now I'm going to go back to contour on another thing, and that is in the beginning of what I showed you. I'm trying to keep these lessons short enough that you understand what I'm saying without going into an hour-long, presentation, which it really does take, but I'm trying to speed it up. So look at this this beautiful mask that is a Papua New Guinea piece that I got off the internet. And so let's say, for example, I wanted to draw this thing or draw an interpretation of it. Okay, the actual one I'm looking at is really small, so I can't see the details as well as you can. So I'm going to simplify this a little bit, and I'm not going to get into too much other than show you roughly how you can study the forms on something like this. So let's go back and go back to our drawing pad so that we can talk about this. All right. Again, let's do an underdrawing. Quick underdrawing of this thing and some contour study. So here we go. The top, as you can see, has this sort of strange crown-like piece on it. There's this sort of oval main mask. Great thing about an underdrawing is you can be sloppy and study it and go, okay, oh, I can't quite get that curve right. Yeah, the curve goes a little more like that. You can be sloppy. This is your chance to study it and also change things you want to change, if that be the case. I'm just going to draw a center line down this thing, and I'm going to say that somewhere, the eyes are coming in somewhere just below this, the sides of that crown piece. And it's got sort of this little way that it curves around. The nose comes down off of that. You can be real loose with this. This is your chance to just, and maybe it's got, I can't really see what's going on. The piece is only about an inch big on my secondary monitor, so I'm trying to interpret it. It's got a mouth way down here. Got some sort of jig jogs over here. Simplified a little bit. And all around here is this string, on the top is this rope stuff. Well, again, without getting into perspective, because eye level's a big deal, where I'm going to tell you quickly one thing. The first thing you want to know about drawing perspective, even in a flat drawing like this, is where your eye level is. Eye level is huge, and you will learn that you can create drama and believability and even scale in eye level. So in this, let's say that our eye level is, let's say that this is hanging on a wall. And if I were somebody, let's do a little cartoon person here. Let's say I was this kid, which I am, and I were sitting here, or standing here, my little eyelashes there, my little nose, looking at this big mask on the wall. And that my eye level is, of course, going to be right here. Oops, how'd that happen? Our eye level, or EL, as you learn when you get taught formal perspective, eye level is right there, right around where the mouth is. Now, you don't always have to draw a person. But in the industry that I'm in, since I'm dealing with when I was drawing a lot with Disney and Universal, and I was doing rides and attractions, you're always trying to show not only what the experience is going to be, but how other people will experience it. So I'm always had to draw people in the pieces and how they were going to interact with the environment. Sometimes you don't have to draw this little person. You never have to do it. But you want to know where your eye level is. And even if there's not a person in your piece and that they're not on the same eye level as you're drawing, think about that. Think about eye level is where I am and where my eyes are and how I'm looking at this particular piece. So, because it changes things. We'll get into ellipses and different things like that. But what happens with eye level is if we were to think of a long tube, like we've learned about wrapping tape, not only does sometimes when you establish it, not only does certain things go back in space and forward, but sometimes you can say they go up and down. They go above your eye level and below your eye level. Things that are right at your eye level that you were to draw, no matter what it is, the line or the tape that we wrapped around this tube goes straight, right with the eye level. It's directly straight. We can't see underneath it. We can't see under. And we can't see above. That's the main thing to think about your eye level. What is above you and what is below your eye level or under your eye level? So now we know with this mask, since we've done this little underdrawing and we're thinking about it, what's above and below? And like I showed you here, the tape. So we can think about the tape. And I know the mask doesn't have this, but I'm going to add this little weird element below just because it'll help me say this principle a little bit. I'm just going to add that to that. It doesn't work design-wise, but I'm just going to show it to you. So now let's do our contour lines. Well, remember, well, also you'll notice when you go above and below, things will also tend to slightly curve in this direction. If you're talking about a tube, it'll curve in this way because you can't see the top of this tube. If this were a plate, for example, or a bowl, let's say it's a bowl, you're looking at the bottom of the bowl because it's above our eye level, as opposed to if we're below this eye level line, or EL, you'd be looking at the top of the bowl, into the bowl, seeing it in that fashion. This is really important because it really helps people get into the piece, get into that glowing fog, right? So with this mask, let's do our underdrawing. Let's just do a line straight across where the mouth is. Then as this mask curves forward, I'm going to curve these lines a little bit in this direction, just like the tube, slightly underneath. Well, normally this, well, let's see this next form I'm showing, we're going to define it as kind of strange. We're not going to go with the, that actually helps me know how to do the bottom of that too. Remember I had it straight before? Well, now that I'm thinking about above and below, I realize that if I'm to go with these lines curving down in this direction to make it go below, and in this direction to go above, ever so slightly, curve them. Well, actually, this is what's so hard to teach drawing and not confuse people. Let's not do anything on the nose. Let's just go curve. Also, let's skip where the eye sockets are there. And then as it gets further and further away from that horizon line, the curve is going to get more extreme until we get outside of the parameters of our drawing. Now, I'm going to do that form of contour on the main face. When it gets over on the nose, well, the nose is, as we know, is not in the same exact plane as the main part of the mask. I'm gonna swoop this up a little bit more in this direction to describe the nose. And again, this becomes intuitive. After a while, you're just going to look at it. Even if you are not an artist, you know what starts to look right, what seems to work. And when you squint at it, you go, oh, that looks three-dimensional. Sometimes you don't know exactly why, but trust me, you'll start to develop a sense of it. This rope top, I'm just going to use kind of the principle that we used before, which is just, well, I'll show you what I'm going to do. Well, okay, so this is above eye level, right? So it's going to have this sort of a curve. Remember, if you're not sure, I mean, you can draw through everything if you want, the front and back, but you end up with a heck of a lot of lines on your line drawing. But all this is doing is just that. It's drawing through it. Now what happens when you get here? Well, just keep going until you get to the middle. Because what we're saying in this drawing is that our center of vision, which is the next thing, that would be if this boy came over and stood directly in the center of this mask. That's what we're drawing this as. Because you usually don't have a person right where your center of vision is, or they'll block your drawing. Center of vision means I'm drawing this mask exactly like I'm standing right there in the middle of it, and I have a left and a right and an above and below eye level, and this is what's happening. So you'll notice that as these curve around, they'll get a little closer to being straight as they get towards the center of vision. Because when we get into perspective, and don't let this confuse you, we're going to get into this much more. When we get into perspective, you'll see how the center of vision and the horizon line really will start to determine an awful lot about your drawing. So, second thing to remember is center of vision. Eye level and center of vision. Some people, I've seen people draw crosses on their drawings before when we get into one-point perspective and things later. To remind them of what is center of vision and where they are in the piece. Doesn't always have to be in the middle of your page either. So with the center of vision here, that means, let's say I wanted the bottom piece that I made up to also be curved in the front. Well, remember all the little clues we learned with the squiggles? Well, we could actually do a squiggle and make it curve back in space. And then as it gets to the center of vision, it just ends up being straight. We could have done that up here too. So here you go. This describes pretty much this piece. Sorry, I'm ruining my curvatures here. So we did an underdrawing. We wrapped tape around this fella, and I could have gotten more complicated and gotten into what happens here with this part of the head, the face here, because it's not going to curve this way. It would probably straighten out for a second and then curve back on the edges. But I don't want to get into that yet. We're going to leave this area out. We're not going to talk about that area right now. Okay, so now we have our underdrawing of this Papua New Guinea mask. Now we can say, okay, now we understand what's going to make it dimensional. Let's just focus on what it really might be, what these cracks really might be. You might want to go ahead and remember, since the tape is not going only this way, but if you know your center of vision, the same thing's going to happen. You're going to have a center line right where you're looking, and then as you go to the left and right, the center line is going to bow slightly in opposite directions. That's like if we're to start making a grid on here. It's going to bow in these directions. This is all study stuff. In other words, you may get confused and have to start all over again, but start to develop a sense of grids and a sense of how these grids help you create a sense of dimension. They're really going to start helping you when you're drawing to play with the idea of how to get 3 dimension in there. Okay, so as I said, let's take this now, and if you were using a pencil, I'd suggest you draw lightly anyway, or you get tracing paper. Tracing paper is really great. It's a way I learned a long time ago too, with kind of the old animation techniques. They used to have a light box that would make their paper that they'd sketch their underdrawing on. When they'd put their other piece of paper on top of it, then they could see their underdrawing and they could define the character with a nice pencil or ink line. So now this Papua New Guinea mask. So what do? Okay, now comes the ink. And again, I'm not going to go crazy on this because we don't have the time. But maybe this one line here becomes, the only reason I'm using it, that I know about it, is to create a crack. Maybe I'm going to do another crack here. When Holden and I talk about a mug or sculpture, we call this checking on a wooden piece. Maybe we see one little tiny crack here until it reaches the eye. Now, if I was to really get into this, this would probably, like I showed you with the tape earlier, this crack would definitely step back in space a little bit when it went into the eye socket, and then it would come out and come back down again probably. But again, start to think about these things. Now, maybe on the outside, we can use a little of that dark to light modeling. Remember I told you things get lighter when they get darker in chiaroscuro type modeling. And we'll just pretend this is wood grain, and we're going to do more and more lines towards the outside of this upper mask. What does that do? Well, you can see what it does. It turns the form of that mask without even us getting into light sources. It helps describe that this mask is turning in that direction. All right, now this part here, we'll get into ellipses later, but you can see the bottom of this tube that's wrapping around. You know how we draw through it, and you can see the front and back, and we kind of do a light line when it comes to the back. Well, here on the bottom, we've ended the tube. So the back and the front line you can see. It's called an ellipse, and we'll get more into that. But now, so what do we want this to be? Well, this is where you could do anything you want. You could say that this is all a bunch of rope or a woven material, sort of material or vine-like material that goes around the outside of this Papua New Guinea mask. And I'm showing you the outside. I'm changing my mind and going, okay, I want this to be scalloped on the outside to describe that this is rope around the outside of this mask. Using all the information I have on my underdrawing, I'm starting to use that information to describe the turning of these forms. The underdrawing was just for my purposes only till I started to feel the form and sculpt with line. Right? I'm simplifying the rope on here. This is not the way to do rope. You really want rope that it actually has more of a serpentine line like that. And anyone who knows about that would tell you and agree. There's the bottom of that. So real quickly, I'm going to now, just because this is turning out to be a very long thing, I'm going to suggest that this is maybe a shell for the eyes. And if you look at the picture, it kind of, the end of the eye socket ends here. And this is where the nose starts. Well, the nose, how do I describe, here's where drawing is you're in control. Okay, I want to describe those lines on that nose so it shows form. So I can either do exactly what I saw in the picture, or since I'm not using any light and dark shading in this, I can do the chiaroscuro modeling, and that means I can do lines towards the outside of the nose, then get light on the inside, do something like this. I could do that, or I could say, I could give them an excuse to put a line across here. Well, there's one of my lines that I'm following, and I'm going to say there's a carved line that goes from there to there, and then tucks around here, and I'm using that to describe how this goes, even though it wasn't in the actual drawing. Or it could be a painted on line if this were a mask that was going here. Then again, you can continue with the chiaroscuro modeling and make this faceplate area just suddenly drop off into a light so that it stops turning the form. And maybe we can do some more checking. Here's a crack down here. There's a little crack here. This is full of crack. There's another checking crack here. Maybe one here, one that comes all the way up here. Got this little mouth form here. And then we reinforce all of that by the outside line or the silhouette of that form. Okay. You'll see a lot of artists use heavier line on the outside. That's actually a technique where artists will do a heavy line on the outside just to really turn a sketch back and allow these lighter lines inside to be less noisy. You know, in other words, drawing is like music. You'll learn to hear the lines of your drawing like music. You have a melody. Well, in drawing, you have focal points, and you have the main gesture of the figure, or the main silhouette of the figure. And you have high notes. This is a high note, big bold note, a lot of contrast. And you have and you have instruments or notes or chords that are less stated, like these little lines. Altogether, they create a song, but you don't want all the instruments to be screaming at the same time or every lyric to be shouted at the same time. You learn to orchestrate a drawing just like you orchestrate a song or a piece of music. So again, here I'm using these lines to create wood grain checking. For example, maybe this is how I'm showing that collar piece come back like that. I'm going to do a little of the chiaroscuro modeling using the wood grain, going darker, and more lines as I go to the outside, and less lines as I go to the inside, reinforcing it by my outside line. Then here, again, we could have more of the, maybe we don't have rope at all. We just have, remember, the center line, center of vision. It's going to be straight up and down, just like anything on this line, even though we didn't have anything. Had we had a line go across right where the mouth is, it probably would be pretty straight. Matter of fact, this mouth would not have, if I put it almost right on the line, it would not curve in any direction at all, even though this is a curved surface. That line would be straight across because we're looking directly at it. And our eye would not decipher it as a curve. That's why in some cases that's okay if you have other things that show you where the curves are. But in other cases, you'd want to say, hey, I'm going to put that mouth, bottom of that mouth, just a little bit curved below it, because we're below the eye level and it's going to curve away from us, just like the chin. And so here are these little curved scallop pieces on the bottom of the collar. Okay. Anyway, again, I'll repeat the idea that these are not drawings I'm doing to create a beautiful drawing. I'd approach it completely differently. I do a lot more design thinking as I go. I'm doing this to show you the principles, and that's the reason you should draw these study drawings I'm doing like this, for only the purpose of learning. Somebody was laughing at my analogy. This is like going to medical school and deciding to go into surgery, and you go in and you practice on cadavers, and you go in there and you learn how to do your incisions, you learn how to close wounds, you learn anatomy. The underdrawing is exactly that. And even this drawing I'm doing here, that's just a study. Now later I'll use this information maybe, and with the intention of creating a really cool drawing, I'll be a lot more careful in what I'm doing. I'll be, a lot more analytical as to how it's harmonizing and how the design works. But you can see, for you, how fun this is. I mean, you want to go, if I were you, it just makes you want to play forever with a drawing. You want to just have fun and create these little worlds and these whole scenarios and things that are completely yours, that are your ideas, your way of viewing the world. And it ends up being the most entertaining thing you can ever do. And you can do it anywhere. You can do it sitting in the doctor's office when you're waiting to go, or the dentist's office before when you're waiting to go in there and get your teeth drilled. Sorry, Steve man, Dr. Man. You can draw things in the room, make stuff up. You wouldn't believe how relaxing and fun it is to draw. No matter whether you've had lessons or not, I'm going to teach you how to draw, and you're going to have a whole different world set out in front of you. Who's that? I don't know. Maybe one of you, when you were younger and you saw your first pop on a Tiki Mask, and you were like, WTF. But I love it. Okay, well, that's my slightly longer But fun lesson in my series, Thor, the Sketching Pirate. Next time, I'll have my technology worked out even better. More lessons, more fun to come. And someday, we'll all sit together and we'll draw. Maybe at the next Tiki Oasis, I'll do a little workshop, or I'll have a bunch of people out in front or inside the Thor pool suite there. And we'll have a big, fun drawing party. How about that? Okay, have a great Sunday. We got a holiday, a 3-day weekend. Have a great time. And thanks again for tuning in. Bye, you guys. Keep drawing.